clear that this meeting is number one for any particular foreign policy reason. It may very well be just because Japan pushed so hard for it, because Japan needs some reassurance on these issues, on the nuclear issue, on their ties, the military bases, etc. They're going to be looking for reassurance as they sit down with the president-elect.
Ivan, as you know, Trump suggested during the campaign, unless Japan reimbursed the United States more money for the 50,000 U.S. troops who are based there, he might pull out those troops. What would be the reaction of that?
Well, it would just kind of destroy one of the central pillars of Japan's national security policy, which relies very much on the U.S. military deployment there. It would also raise some serious questions. Where will the U.S. put its 7th Navy Fleet, for example, which has been operating in the Pacific Ocean since World War II? That comprises more than 40,000 sailors and troops and more than 100 aircraft, dozens of ships as well. Where would they go? Aides to the Japanese Prime Minister have been making the case, listen, it's pretty affordable for the U.S. to have its troop deployment in Japan, arguing that Japan pays more than 50% of the cost, different estimates up to perhaps $5 billion a year that Japan pays, and that's far more, Japan argues, than Germany or South Korea pay for U.S. deployments in those countries. So it would essentially upend the post-World War II kind of military and strategic architecture in the Pacific Ocean that the U.S. has helped set up for some 70 years, Wolf.
It's interesting, and Elise, as the president-elect is meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan earlier, just a few hours ago, the President of the United States, President Obama, was meeting with Angela Merkel in Germany, and he said he hopes Donald Trump is willing to stand up to Russia. Those are pretty significant words.
Very significant, and I think what you're saying from President Obama is, traditional diplomacy, right? Traditional diplomacy is not, big deal-making between leaders. It's what they call tending the garden, the nurturing of relationships and alliances, and also sending signals to the world, just like President Obama was sending a message to Donald Trump, don't make deals with Russia, giving all the complicated issues that we're talking about today. And whether you agree with President Obama's diplomacy or not, or his policies, he always is trying to be statesmanlike and send these careful messages. Now, you haven't seen that from Donald Trump, talking about alliances, talking about building relationships. You hear a lot about adversaries or how countries are a drain. And so these kind of meetings like today, with no preparation from the State Department or the Defense Department, no briefing, much like the calls we've been talking about, are a little bit risky because right now countries might have given him a pass on the campaign, but now they're really listening to what the president-elect has.
And we're expecting a statement from the Trump campaign on this important meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan. Also a statement from the Prime Minister Abe. I think he's going to go to the microphones. We'll, of course, have live coverage of that. Also coming up, we're expecting a statement from the Trump transition about other developments that are going on. Of course, a statement involving this meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan, and more on this afternoon. Surprising breaking news, important breaking news, that Donald Trump will meet this weekend with Mitt Romney, who may be under consideration for a senior role in the Trump administration. News, building trust. Donald Trump holds his first meeting with a world leader sitting down in New York with Japan's Prime Minister. He says he wants to build trust with the next U.S. Commander-in-Chief. They discuss Trump's remarks about Japan building a nuclear arsenal. Team of rivals, Trump is meeting with some of his sharpest critics as he works to fill top positions in his upcoming administration. Among them, Mitt Romney, who previously called Trump a phony and a fraud. Could their meeting this weekend signal a role for Romney in the Trump cabinet? Stronger together. An emotional Hillary Clinton speaks out for the first time since conceding the election, urging her supporters to stay engaged. The outgoing Premier Putin. Will Trump heed Obama's message? We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. News, Donald Trump's first meeting with a world leader since becoming president-elect. Trump is talking face-to-face with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe at Trump's New York headquarters right now. It's the latest in a series of meetings that saw prominent Republicans passing through Trump Tower all day. Trump talked to more than half a dozen potential candidates for top administration posts. And a source tells CNN Trump will meet this weekend with Mitt Romney, one of his sharpest GOP critics, during the campaign. CNN has learned Romney is interested in serving as Secretary of State, which our source calls a serious possibility. And President Obama has a warning for Donald Trump: stand up to Russia. Speaking in Germany, the president urged the president-elect not to cut deals with Vladimir Putin and to maintain a strong transatlantic alliance. Obama says otherwise, we will be giving our children a worse world. We're covering all of that, much more this hour with our guests, including Senator Chris Coons and our correspondents and our expert analysts. They are also standing by. Let's begin with the Trump transition. Our political reporter Sarah Murray has the very latest for us. Sarah, a flurry of meetings today for the president-elect.
That's right, and a number of surprising people have been passing through Trump Tower this week. We saw Ted Cruz earlier, and of course, today Donald Trump met with Nikki Haley, and on Saturday he'll be meeting with Mitt Romney. All of this as the Trump team tries to send a signal that maybe they're interested in building a team of rivals. But the big question, will Trump actually go through with picking any of these folks to serve in his cabinet?
Joining the top advisors, potential cabinet picks, and family members coming through Trump Tower's revolving doors, some new faces, like Florida Governor Rick Scott and Texas Congressman Jeb Hensarling. Donald Trump also meeting today with South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, a sharp critic throughout the campaign.
During anxious times, it can be tempting to follow the siren call of the angriest voices. We must resist that temptation.
Now, sources say she's under consideration for Secretary of State. It's the latest indication, according to Trump advisors, that the president-elect is willing to look beyond past grudges as he builds his administration.
It doesn't matter to him what your political party was or where you stood in the primary. If you are the best person for that job, then he wants you as part of this team.
All of this as Trump's top advisors say he's ready to deliver on one of his key campaign promises.
We are going to Washington, D.C., and we are going to drain the swamp.
Advisors say Trump will enact a 5-year lobbying ban after executive branch appointees leave office, and a lifetime ban on representing foreign governments.
It's a major campaign promise that Donald Trump made, and he's already delivering on it during transition as the president-elect.
But it's unclear how Trump's team will define lobbyists, and whether people will simply skirt the rules by choosing not to register as lobbyists and labeling themselves consultants instead. One senior Trump advisor says ridding the government of lobbyists was the last straw in Trump's strained relationship with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. After Christie presented Trump a transition memo peppered with lobbyists and establishment hires, he was dismissed as head of the transition effort, and Vice President-elect Mike Pence stepped in. One outstanding question is where Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will fit in the mix. A source says while Kushner will play a role in a Trump White House, it's unclear whether it will be formal or informal. As Trump works to flesh out his government from New York, Pence was on Capitol Hill for meetings with members of Congress, including House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and House Speaker Paul Ryan, who's already tempering expectations on another of Trump's core campaign promises.
It's too early to have to know the answer to how fast can Obamacare relief occur. What we're focused on is how we get Obamacare repealed and what we replace it with, so that we can get that relief to the American families as fast as possible.
Now, one of the things Trump's advisors are making clear is Donald Trump is not feeling any pressure to rush and name people who will serve in his cabinet. He's had a number of meetings. He has a number of meetings coming up, and frankly, he's enjoying that. He likes to be able to pick the brains of these various people who are passing through Trump Tower, and he wants to have as much information as possible before he begins to name his cabinet picks. Wolf?
CNN Sarah Murray, thank you very much. Let's get some more on the breaking news. Donald Trump's meeting that's underway right now with the Japanese Prime Minister over at Trump Tower in New York. Our senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta has the very latest just outside Trump Tower. So Jim, Japan obviously a critical U.S. ally.
Absolutely, Wolf, and this is where campaign rhetoric meets the reality of governing. Donald Trump is meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe right now. I should caution, though, that there appears to be a big gaggle inside the lobby of Trump Tower right now, Wolf, so we're waiting to find out whether or not that meeting has ended. But as you said, there are lots of important issues for the Japanese Prime Minister to talk about with the President-elect. Chief among them, you've talked about this, Donald Trump's past rhetoric saying that perhaps Japan should defend itself on the world stage in that volatile region, being close to North Korea, and perhaps even have its own nuclear arsenal. But Wolf, there are some pressing economic issues as well. Keep in mind, Donald Trump has talked about tariffs on Japanese goods if they don't remove their tariffs on American goods that are imported into Japan. He's also, Donald Trump has said, full stop, that he is not going to support the Trans-Pacific Partnership that President Obama was trying to hammer into some kind of agreement or law before he leaves office. Obviously, that's not going to happen. And so there are plenty of issues for the Japanese Prime Minister to talk about. The transition points out that Donald Trump has met with some 32 world leaders so far. He and Vice President-elect have met with some 32 foreign leaders so far. We expect more of those meetings to come in the weeks ahead, Wolf.
All phone calls so far, but there'll be many more face-to-face meetings, I assume. All right, Jim Acosta, thanks very much. Let's get some more on all of this. Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware is joining us. He's a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks very much.
Thank you, Wolf.
All right, so Donald Trump meeting right now with the Prime Minister, Japanese Prime Minister Abe. It's a private meeting going on as we speak. Are you encouraged that Trump is holding these face-to-face meetings now, starting with Prime Minister Abe in New York?
Well, given Donald Trump's very limited previous experience in foreign affairs and foreign policy, I think it's vital that he have meetings such as this, both to get to know our vital allies around the world and to hopefully reassure them. Some of his rhetoric in the course of the campaign about NATO, about our vital allies in the Pacific Rim like South Korea and Japan, I think were truly troubling to those who've been our reliable, trusted allies for decades and upon whom we've built our security architecture around the world. So it's my hope that these are constructive and informative meetings for Donald Trump, and it's my hope that the stories that we've a number of names in the introduction about who he might consider for Secretary of State also suggest he's willing to overlook the slights and the fight of the campaign and to consider folks, even those who criticized him in the past, who might have some greater international experience than folks who were mentioned in the first couple of days.
Yeah, I assume you're referring to Mitt Romney. Is he someone you could easily vote to confirm?
Well, I think we owe it to the American people to have a full confirmation hearing process, regardless of who is nominated, whether it's for Supreme Court Justice or Attorney General or Secretary of State. But Mitt Romney certainly brings the kind of senior government experience as governor, as a candidate for president, and as someone, I'll remind you, who in 2012 in the presidential campaign said that he saw Russia as one of the greatest security challenges we would face in this century. So I frankly think Mitt Romney has established himself as a credible candidate and who sees our current challenges in the world clearly.
Yeah, he called Russia, I remember exactly 4 years ago, it was in an interview with me, America's #1 geopolitical foe. That was he was criticized at the time, including by President Obama, but he seemed to have been ahead of the curve on that one. Let's talk a little bit about some other issues right now. The Trump team is discussing implementing a program used during the Bush administration where immigrants from visitors from more than 24 countries would be required to register upon entering the country. Almost all of those countries were majority Muslim countries. Would you be in favor of reinstating that program?
I'd have to better understand the contours of what he was trying to accomplish and how it would be run. The way that program was run under the Bush administration, my understanding is it frankly didn't significantly contribute to our security, but it did send a strong message that we were closely tracking Muslims as they entered the United States and frankly barring many people from majority Muslim countries from entering the United States. The president under our immigration laws has significant power to set limits on who can come into the United States. So he may well legally be able to do that. That program was not legally overturned while President Bush implemented it. The question is, does it really make us safer? Does it really make sense? And I would look hard at it. I think we would expect to have some hearings on that, and it's my hope that we could, working together, find some way to craft a program that would respond to the very real terrorist threats around the world, but without doing so in a way that singles out people of a particular faith. I think that's a dangerous path to go down, and I think Donald Trump's rhetoric during the campaign disturbingly suggested that he might be more interested in blocking folks based on their Muslim faith rather than based on their threat to our national security.
He moderated that view, though, during the course of the campaign. Originally a temporary ban on all Muslims coming to the United States, but then he wants extreme vetting from countries where there's ISIS, terrorist-related incidents in those countries. Are you in favor of what he would call extreme vetting from a country, let's say, like Syria?
Well, Wolf, as is the case with so many other things Donald Trump said in the course of the campaign, I don't really know what extreme vetting means. I do think that we should have thorough and detailed background checks on anyone who's coming to our country where we have a credible reason to believe that the community that they're coming from might well harbor terrorists who would do us harm. Those folks, people who we should have concerns about, aren't limited just to a few majority Muslim countries. But I do think our Department of Homeland Security and our intelligence community do a good job of that today. So what exactly extreme vetting might mean, we don't know. And I think in the interests of protecting civil liberties and our reputation in the world as a welcoming country, we ought to strike a good balance, and we ought to ask for a clear explanation from a potential Trump administration about exactly what they're trying to achieve and work through what message it would send to 1 billion Muslims around the world.
All right, Senator, stay with us. We have more to discuss. Other issues emerging right now. We'll take a quick break. We'll resume this conversation. Senator Delaware is a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, we'll get back to you in a moment. We're following some breaking news right now. The House Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, she is being challenged. Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio has just announced he's running for minority leader, underscoring the party's post-election disarray. Let's get some more from our senior Washington correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, Hillary Clinton is encouraging Democrats to continue the fight, but some in the party are looking for ways to work with Donald Trump.
Well, many Democrats tonight are looking for ways to work with him, particularly on areas where he's at odds with his own party. These unlikely alliances could unfold on infrastructure spending and other populist campaign messages. Now, the Democratic Party is trying to find its way forward, even as Hillary Clinton still tries to find meaning in her stunning defeat.
I know many of you are deeply disappointed about the results of the election. I am too, more than I can ever express.
Hillary Clinton offering new words about her punishing loss. She's searching for meaning and dispensing comfort as Democrats look forward.
I will admit, coming here wasn't the easiest thing for me. There have been a few times this past week when all I wanted to do was just to curl up with a good book or our dogs and never leave the house again.
Appearing at a Children's Defense Fund dinner last night, Clinton was greeted with a standing ovation. It was not the return to Washington she hoped for.
I know this isn't easy. I know that over the past week, a lot of people have asked themselves whether America is the country we thought it was. The divisions laid bare by this election run deep. But please listen to me when I say this. America is worth it. Our children believe in our country, fight for our values, and never, ever give up.
Democrats are swiftly moving forward, beyond the Clinton era, finding their footing as Republicans prepare to take charge of Congress and the White House. In Berlin tonight, President Obama is still explaining Donald Trump's victory to the world.
He ran an extraordinarily unconventional campaign, and it resulted in the biggest political upset in perhaps modern political history. He now has to transition to governance.
That transition underway on Capitol Hill. Vice President-elect Mike Pence meeting with leaders of both parties. Tonight, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi is facing a new threat. Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan is jumping into the race to challenge her, saying what we are doing right now is not working. Pelosi defended her tenure.
We cannot be taking the full responsibility for what happened in the election.
All this as Democrats are pledging to work with Trump of the populist message he campaigned on, eager to exploit any divisions with Trump and Republicans. Vice President Biden says Democrats must respect Trump supporters, particularly if they hope to win them back next time. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders is trying to fill the Democratic vacuum and pull the party's reins back from Clinton in his progressive direction.
It is time for a new direction for the Democratic Party.
At a breakfast with reporters today, Sanders said it's time for Democrats to reassess what they stand for, even though Clinton did win the popular vote.
What role do you believe she should play in rebuilding the party?
She has a very important role to play in the future of the Democratic Party. It does not mean that she and I are going to agree on every issue. Frankly, we are not going to agree on every issue.
Now, as Democrats find their footing, there are limits to this cooperation with Trump. But many Democrats believe the way out of the wilderness is by accomplishing something in Washington, not being part of the gridlock or obstructionism. But on Capitol Hill, at least, Wolf, that leadership election for Nancy Pelosi now after Thanksgiving will offer an early sign of how strong the winds of change are actually blowing.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Jeff Zeleny reporting for us. Let's get back to Senator Chris Coons, a Delaware member of the Foreign Relations Committee. As you know, Nancy Pelosi now facing some competition for her leadership. I know the Senate already has chosen a new Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer of New York. But is it time for some fresh leadership for the Democrats in the House of Representatives? Tim Ryan, the congressman challenging Nancy Pelosi, said under her leadership since 2010, the Democrats in the House have lost 60 seats. He thinks some new blood is needed. What do you think?
Well, Wolf, I think it's important for us to demonstrate that we hear the message of this election. There were tens of millions of Americans who really didn't want to vote for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Folks who are deeply frustrated that we're not making progress in addressing the issues that they really care about. So if working with Donald Trump to get people back to work, building the infrastructure of this country, improving our roads and our bridges, our tunnels and our airports is the way forward, I'm willing to do that. And we've heard from our newly elected leader, Chuck Schumer in the Senate, that he agrees that we ought to be able to find ways to work with a Trump administration and with Donald Trump. But to be clear, there were some things that Donald Trump said in the campaign that were alarming, offensive, or even despicable. And frankly, if he tries to move forward on some of those, we'll oppose him vigorously. I do think it's time for all of us in the Democratic Party to reassess whether we've heard the voices of those who've been left behind in globalization and who feel like they just don't have enough opportunity in this country. And this is folks of a wide range of backgrounds and from a wide range of states. We're going to spend time on that in the next couple of weeks. We've already started in the Senate Democratic Caucus, and it's my hope that as the American family gathers for Thanksgiving and as folks all over this country have to sit down across a table with people who voted for someone who they really opposed, that we'll learn how to listen to each other better, and as my friend Joe Biden said in the clip you just ran, that we'll learn to respect those who have felt left out in the decades behind.
But do you think it's time for Nancy Pelosi to move on, let someone else take over the Democratic leadership in the House?
Well, if that's going to get decided by the House Democratic Caucus, Tim Ryan, who's challenging her, is from Youngstown, Ohio, and is the sort of young leader who really might be the next face of the Democratic Party in the House. I've known